Hello everyone, and welcome once again to Caleb Likes Books. Today I have a ranking video for you, which is very exciting. I don't get to do a whole lot of ranking videos, so I'm very happy whenever I am able to. And today I'm going to be ranking the 6 Star Wars books so far that have been written by Claudia Gray. I finally wrapped up Claudia Gray's Star Wars books a few months ago. I read the last couple that I needed. And so I've been planning to do this video ever since, and I'm, just now getting around to it. So Claudia Gray is a fantastic Star Wars author. She is arguably my favorite one, definitely at least in my top 2 or 3. I really love every one of the books of hers that I have read, which of course is all her Star Wars books. I haven't read any of her non-Star Wars books, but maybe someday I will. And she still has more to come, some more High Republic books, and hopefully some other ones as well, but at the moment she only has 6 out, including both the young adult and the adult books. Before I start this ranking, a few things to point out. First of all, just going to list off the books that she has written, possibly in the order they came out. I'm going to try to get it, but it's going to be from memory, so I might be wrong. There's Lost Stars, there was Bloodline, there was Leia, Princess of Alderaan, there was Master and Apprentice, and then the High Republic, Into the Dark, and the High Republic, The Fallen Star, with a couple more to come, I think, within the next year or two, for the High Republic at least. But those are the ones that are currently released so far, so those are the ones that I'm going to be ranking in this video. So first, I just want to say I do like all of these books. So just because a book is towards the bottom of my ranking does not mean I dislike it. In fact, I would say all of these books are at least like a solid 8 out of 10, which for me is pretty dang good. None of these books are bad. I think that the bottom 3 and the top 3 have a pretty decent distance between them. I would say all of the bottom 3 are like 8, maybe 8.5 out of 10, whereas all of my top 3 I would say are all 10 out of 10. So I love all of these books. But, I just like some more than others. So let me know down in the comments once you're finished watching this what your ranking of these books is, because I'm curious to hear. I think I maybe have a couple of more hot takes in this ranking, but it should be interesting. But anyways, we're going to get started now at my number 6, which is the first hot take that I have, which might be the only hot take I have in this list, but it is certainly a hot take from what I've seen. That's Master and Apprentice. This is a book that I see commonly considered to be one of, if not the best Star Wars book by Claudia Gray, and one of the best Star Wars books in general. I would agree this is a very good book for sure. Like I said, even my bottom picks are still like a solid 8 out of 10. So this is still a really good book. There's a lot in here that I really, really like, especially Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon. Of course, this book takes place a few years before The Phantom Menace, and focuses heavily on Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon as a master and apprentice duo, as you might assume based on the title. That was definitely by far the best thing about this book. In fact, I was never a big fan of Qui-Gon. I know he's a fan favorite within the Star Wars fandom, but I just never really got him until I read this book. And I read this book and I loved Qui-Gon. I loved his dynamic with Obi-Wan. I loved the way Obi-Wan was written. All that stuff. That was the best part of this book for me. The overarching plot was also pretty solid. I frankly don't remember very much of it. I feel like that was one of the more forgettable aspects of the book, and that's mainly why it's on the bottom of my list, is because I really love the character work in this book, but the plot didn't quite stick with me. But I do remember enjoying the plot of this book a decent amount, especially I think in the second half. It really kind of picked up for me, or something like that. But this was a really good book, but it does happen to be my least favorite, but it does have some of that awesome stuff like Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon. Number 5 is a book that I really wish I could have higher. This is, I would say, the most difficult placement for me is my number 4 and my number 5 picks. You really could switch these depending on the day, but right now I'm feeling this is my number 5, and that is The High Republic, Into the Dark. This is the very first young adult novel for the High Republic, the second novel in general for the High Republic that came out. And I read this when it came out along with Light of the Jedi. I've fallen a bit behind on the High Republic recently, but I read all of Phase 1 basically at release. Into the Dark is, again, a really, really good book that, again, especially I think really works with its characters. I think Claudia Gray is an excellent character writer, so even though I'm probably going to mention it, just assume all of these books have excellent character writing. But Into the Dark, I think, had really strong characters, but again, the plot is what keeps it a little bit down for me. It was a good plot, but it was not amazing in my opinion, but the characters really are the shining point in this book. Reath Silas is one of my favorite Star Wars High Republic characters in general. I love him. I love him in this book. I love him in the other two young adult books in Phase 1. But I think he was maybe at his best in this book. He was a character that I personally related to. I think out of the High Republic characters, he is the one who I related to the most, just because we are similar in a lot of ways. But he's an excellent character. You also get introduced to other characters like Orla and Comac, the vessel crew, who are excellent and wonderful every time I have seen them appear. And all the other characters are excellent in this book as well. You get introduced to the threat of the Drengir, which one thing that slightly holds this book back for me, which isn't any fault of the book on its own, but I do wish that the Drengir had been the villains throughout the young adult books of Phase 1. That was one thing that kind of disappointed me, because I haven't read like the comics or the middle grade books, and I know the Drengir are more prevalent in those, but the other two young adult books are all Nihil, basically, and there is some Nihil in this book, but it's predominantly Drengir. And I do wish that had been followed through with the other young adult books, but that's not really a fault of this book on its own, but it does kind of sour it slightly for me looking back. But it's still a really great book. It, again, has great character stuff, and was a very interesting read, and one that I would say I liked equally compared to the first High Republic book, Light of the Jedi. I think it was back-to-back some great books. So, number 4 on my list, again, kind of, you could switch this with Into the Dark if you really wanted to, but right now I think I like this one a little more, and that is Lost Stars. This is the very first Claudia Gray book that I read. It is the first canon book that I read outside of the High Republic. I believe I read the first two High Republic books, you know, Light of the Jedi and Into the Dark, and then I believe I read this one. So it holds a very special place in my heart for that reason. But this is, again, a really excellent book. This is one that I didn't expect to dislike it because it was a Star Wars book, and generally I like Star Wars books. Although that has changed a little bit in the last year, where I've read a few that really did not do it for me. But, you know, I figured I would enjoy it because it was Star Wars. But I didn't know how I would feel about it because this is primarily a romance book. Or maybe not even primarily. It's a very big part of the book, but it still has plenty of action and all that kind of stuff. But it is very heavy on the romance between Thane and Sienna, if I remember that correctly. I hope I'm getting those names right. But the plot of this book, again, and the characters were really good in this book. And that is the main reason why I put this above Into the Dark and Master and Apprentice, is because I actually think, in addition to the characters being great, the plot was also very interesting. This book basically is a romance about these two people who fell in love at a young age, and then ended up on opposite sides of the Galactic Civil War. One is a part of the Rebellion, one is a part of the Empire, which throws a very interesting wrench into the situation, which was wonderful. The romance in this book was interesting and believable. The character writing was really good. The ability to see the war from two different perspectives was super interesting. Seeing, you know, a bunch of the battles are in this book. I remember specifically, I'm pretty sure the Battle of Yavin is in this book. The Battle of Hoth is in this book. You know, all the big central battles of the Galactic Civil War are in this book. So seeing that was really interesting. And this was just an excellent book all around, and even though I'm not really a romance guy most of the time, it really did surpass my expectations quite a bit. Even though I am not super into that kind of thing, I still really enjoyed this book a lot. So that brings us to number 3. Now, like I said, my number 3, number 2, and number 1 are also very close together. I consider all 3 of these to be like at least like a 9.5 out of 10. And I would be comfortable giving all 3 of these a 10 out of 10. These are among my favorite Star Wars canon books and my favorite Star Wars books in general, Legends or canon. I love all 3 of these, so picking between them is very difficult for me, but I think I've settled on a decent order for them. So at number 3, and it hurts me so much to put this at number 3 considering how highly I've praised it in the past, is The High Republic: The Fallen Star. This is the 3rd and final adult book in High Republic Phase 1. And if you have seen my Star Wars book ranking that I did a few months ago now, my top 10 Star Wars books, which you can go check out if you would like to. It's still one of the videos I'm most proud of. I really enjoyed it. This was very high on that list. In fact, I believe it was my number 2. It was either this or Rising Storm. I'm pretty sure I said Fallen Star, though. So it hurts me so much to not have this higher, but it is really excellent. I do think the main thing that, again, keeps this a bit lower than the other two for me is that when I first read it, and I haven't read it again since, all of these books I've only read once, by the way. Probably will reread them at some point, but when I read this, the first half of the book was not quite 100% grabbing me. It was still very interesting, but it wasn't quite there. But the second half of this book is, for me, in terms of phase 1 at least, I'm still not caught up on phase 2, but in terms of phase 1, the second half of this book is the best part of the High Republic that I have read so far. I loved the second half of this book. But the one thing holding it back is the first half. It didn't quite grab me as much. But again, great character stuff, great resolutions for phase 1, really great tension, even some maybe a little bit of horror elements, which I really enjoyed. Super, super emotional and impactful character moments that I don't often have strong emotional reactions reading books. I mean, I'll have strong emotional reactions, but I won't like physically like cry. For example, very often I cried reading this book at least once, maybe twice. So it was just a very hard-hitting book, very emotional, very well done, very exciting. I read it in like 2 days. It was just so excellent, but it does get a little lower on this list just because the first half didn't grab me as much as the second half did. But it is still, like, again, like I said, I would be comfortable giving this a 10 out of 10. It was that great. Number 2, the final 2 books, if you have not noticed, are the 2 Leia books that Claudia Gray has written, because I think those are absolutely excellent. So my number 2 spot goes to Leia, Princess of Alderaan. This was excellent. I loved this book so much. This actually my top 2 books, the 2 Leia books, are the ones that I read most recently. In fact, the 2 books that I still had to read before I could actually make this video are the ones that I read over the course of this summer, funnily enough. But Leia, Princess of Alderaan is excellent. Great job with Leia. And I really enjoyed everything about this book, really. Kind of covers her early days in the Imperial Senate, getting started there, and also starting to work with the rebellion as well, finding out about the rebellion and then becoming interested in working with them. And that was excellently done. Leia is written so well in this book. Again, kind of similar to Qui-Gon. I always liked Leia, but I never loved Leia. And this book, along with the next one I'm going to talk about, really made me love Leia. I thought she was excellent in this book. Other characters were great in this book. And in general, this one, I think, is just all around really great. Great character stuff, great plot. I love the more political side of the plot with this book, with her, being involved in the Imperial Senate and then also trying to, help people who have been disadvantaged by, the Empire or things like that. And then eventually becoming a part of the Rebel Alliance. And that was all awesome. My number 1 pick, if you haven't figured it out already, is Bloodline, which, again, funnily enough, is the most recent one that I read, but I do think it is very deserving of this spot. This is, without a doubt, one of the best Star Wars books I've ever read, as are all of my top 3, really. This book was everything I loved about Princess of Alderaan, but even better. Great Leia stuff. This takes place, I want to say 5 to 10 years before The Force Awakens, so a bit later in Leia's life. But Leia, again, written excellently in this book. Great other characters in this book as well. The plot is super interesting. Again, much more political, kind of like Princess of Alderaan, but I think even more so in this book because it's an adult novel, so it kind of can focus more on those things than the young adult novels maybe can. And the plot of this book, which I'm not going to spoil the big thing that happens in this book because it's one of those things that I think really should be experienced, by yourself as you're reading it. But the big thing that happens in this book, like 2/3 of the way through, was an excellent choice that I loved. And this book does a great job of showing Leia's, actions as a politician, and then some of the opposition that she faces throughout the whole book, and especially in that later third of the book. And it was excellent all the way through. I loved everything about this book. And if you want deeper thoughts on this one, in fact, this one, Princess of Alderaan, and I think those are the only ones that I've reviewed on my channel, actually. So if you want my thoughts on Leia, Princess of Alderaan, or Bloodline in more depth, you can watch the reviews on my channel, because I can't talk about them too much here. But everything in this book was amazing, and I loved it. Definitely very deserving of this spot, even though it's the most recent one I read. I wanted to wait a little bit before doing this video, because when I first read it, I was like, this is my favorite one so far, but I want to wait and see if that's just recency bias. It definitely was not. This is an excellent book, and I would highly, highly recommend all of these books, but especially Bloodline. So that pretty much wraps up this video. Let me know down in the comments what your ranking of Claudia Gray's Star Wars books is. What are your favorites? What are your least favorites? Is your ranking similar to mine, or maybe yours is completely different? I expect many people are going to have Master and Apprentice much higher than I do, for example. But let me know that down in the comments below. Love this author. She's written some excellent stuff, so I think any ranking could pretty much be justified, to be honest. So let me know all that down in the comments, and your thoughts on my list. So that is pretty much it for this video, and so I will see you guys next time.